News!
Okay, we'll start with this. This past weekend at the fights, unbeaten featherweights Raven Chapman and Sky Nicolson caught up with each other.
Sky's supposed to be fighting for the newly vacated WBC title real soon, presumably in April against Sarah Mahfoud, former IBF champion.
But a fight between her and Raven Chapman seems all but an eventuality. It's going to happen sooner or later. Sky Nicolson is currently ranked at number 1, en route to becoming this division's newly crowned WBC champion, and currently Raven Chapman is ranked at number 5.
The fight between them may be closer than you think.
The only fighters ranked ahead of Raven Chapman are Nina Menke, who's about to face Amanda Serrano. Amanda's likely going to beat her, and when she does, she'll lose ground in the WBC's ranked standings. She's ranked at number 4. Ranked at number 3 is current reigning super bantamweight champion Erica Cruz, who doesn't even campaign as a featherweight anymore, so I don't know what she's doing there at number 3. And at number 2 is Sarah Mahfoud, who Sky Nicholson's about to fight.
The fighters ranked in between Sky Nicholson and Raven Chapman, in other words, are otherwise preoccupied, so a fight between Raven and Sky is closer than it appears.
With all this talk of an upcoming Matchroom versus Queensberry show, Sky Nicholson being a Matchroom fighter and Raven Chapman being with Queensberry, it's conceivable that the fight between them could materialize as soon as this year, if not on that Matchroom versus Queensberry show later on down the line, because as stated,
They're trailing each other in the ranks.
it's only a matter of time. The sooner the fight happens, the better for Raven Chapman. The sooner the better, because based on their contrasting styles, I would give Raven Chapman's aggressive come-forward volume punching the edge over Sky Nicholson's economic outside fighting.
They're polar opposites in terms of styles. Where Raven Chapman is aggressive and come forward, Sky Nicholson likes to hang back, stay on the outside.
Mid-range to inside, Sky Nicholson is quite vulnerable. She hasn't really shown the ability to handle herself there. Rather, she chooses to move around,
Sharpshoot.
staying along the perimeter of the ropes in the hopes of catching her opponent on the way in, setting traps.
And it's worked for her. It's worked for her so far, but very few of the opponents that she's faced have the foot speed of a Raven Chapman. Raven will be all over her like white on rice, and the sooner the fight happens, the more it favors Raven Chapman.
I say the sooner the better because Sky Nicholson is still young. She still has time to add more layers to her game, more to her repertoire. I don't know that she's going to, but once again, she does have time. So it would behoove Raven Chapman to get her in the ring and get her in the ring soon before she does that. Could see this fight materializing before year's end. I could see this fight materializing before year's end on the Matchroom side of things as opposed to Queensberry, because I could sooner see Queensberry letting Raven cross the street than the other way around.
And tack on that in just a few months' time, Sky Nicholson might see herself become the champion. Well, she'll have the leverage in the situation then, now wouldn't she?
If she beats Sarah Mahfoud for the newly vacated WBC title, she will be the reigning champion in the situation, going into what could be a Raven Chapman fight. Thus, I would sooner expect Raven to cross over to Matchroom than Sky crossing over to Queensberry.
That's how I see it.
Dangerous fight for Sky Nicholson if and when the time comes. A dangerous fight, perhaps a more dangerous fight even than the Sarah Mahfoud fight. Former IBF champion Sarah Mahfoud, who's more experienced than Sky and more experienced than Raven as a professional, though not as talented. She doesn't have as high a ceiling as they do.
I would give Sky Nicholson better odds against Sarah Mahfoud than Raven Chapman.
Cross that bridge when we get to it. Things are heating up at 126 pounds. In men's super lightweight news, Leonard Ellaby believes Rolly Romero will win emphatically. Clip Isaac Cruz early. And he's going to say that because Rolly's the fighter in this fight that he just so happens to promote. So naturally, that's what he's going to say. He's going to back his man.
Naturally.
We know that Pitbull's going to come, explained Ellaby to Fight Hub TV. I think that's going to play right into Rolly's hands. Romero's skills have always been placed under the microscope and chastised profusely, but his power, on the other hand, has never been doubted. Most recently, he rode it to the finish line as he scored a controversial stoppage win over Ishmael Barroso. Few have stood directly in front of Romero and traded bombs with him. Even Davis, who ultimately stopped him, boxed and moved before finding the fight-ending shot in the 6th.
Will Isaac Cruz be able to find a similar fight-ending shot? When Gervonta Davis found that shot, that counter, he was moving lateral and boxing off the back foot, whereas Isaac Cruz, he's a come-forward guy. He's a pressure fighter.
Not a counter puncher. With Isaac Cruz, what you see is what you get. And what you see is pressure fighting, volume punching, crowding the pocket.
Even if his approach is crude, it does take a certain level of skill to be able to work around that. And Rolly Romero, even if he's strong, he's not skilled.
I think he's gonna win. He's gonna win emphatically, and I think Rolly is gonna clip him early. It would not surprise me one bit. This coming from the same man who picked Caleb Plant to beat Canelo Alvarez.
I don't believe it.
In truth, I don't think Leonard believes it. I think he's just saying what you would expect him to say in that situation because he promotes Rolly Romero. But the reality of it is, Isaac, at least to the eye, appears to be a more durable fighter than Rolly Romero, as they both shared the ring with Gervonta Davis, but only one of them went the distance with him, and that was Isaac, not Rolly. Rolly got sat down. Rolly got knocked out.
I think Isaac is a bit more durable than Rolly Romero. They can both punch hard to some degree. They can both punch, but Isaac's more durable. And Isaac is a smaller target. You want to pay attention to that.
He's already pretty small as far as lightweights go, but he comes in at a slight crouch, bending at the waist, bending at the knees, hunkering down, leaning off to one side to bring big looping punches over.
And even if Isaac's approach is crude, even if Isaac's approach seems simple, it does take a certain level of skill to work around a fighter like this. You don't want to make yourself a stationary target, and you don't want to sell out and trade with him every time he comes forward. That plays into his hands.
They really didn't do Rolly Romero any favors allowing him to go through with this fight because he could very well lose it. And I know that he could have lost to Ryan Garcia as well, but he would have made more money losing to Ryan than potentially losing to Isaac. Whoever advised Rolly to go through with this did not have Rolly Romero's best interests in mind.
It's the job of the manager to act as a buffer in between the fighter and the promoter, to take care of the fighter and fight for the fighter, to ensure that the fighter is getting the best deal out there. And this is not the best deal for Rolly.
I'm not sure who Rolly's manager is, to be honest with you. I'm not sure if it's Al Heyman that manages him. Al Heyman advises him, but on the predication that it is, this move, fighting Isaac on an undercard instead of fighting Ryan in a main event, that services Al Heyman more than it services Rolly Romero. And that's the conflict of interest that comes with what seems to be a manager that also acts a lot like a promoter, brokering deals with different platforms.
There's no way it works out to where Rolly makes more money with Isaac than what he could have made with Ryan. There's no fucking way.
So then what you have to wonder is, if that's the case, why did they guide him in that direction? And who really benefits from that? Other PBC-related news. Boxing insider Rick Lacier says Canelo's big announcement on Tuesday will be in part that he has left the PBC. As I said he would in a previous post here, that the PBC did not have the money to establish a guarantee of Canelo's purse to be put in escrow for a purposed May 4th fight, nor could PBC find a guarantor. Looks like Canelo will fight Jaime Munguia and not Jermall Charlo, as Charlo is PBC affiliated. Looking forward to Tuesday's big Canelo announcement.
Losing that acquisition would be a major blow to the PBC's catalog and what fights they mean to do, what fights they mean to stage in this calendar year. Their overall offering, if you don't have Canelo Alvarez anymore, what do you have? The Spence versus Crawford rematch doesn't look to be happening.
There's no new news in reference to Gervonta Davis. The only new news in reference to him are talks between him and the people at Matchroom for a Conor Benn fight that may or may not happen, but no news in reference to the PBC.
Nope.
And what Gervonta is going to do with them. If he does do something with them, it must be later on in the year. See what I mean? What big fights do they plan on putting on? What big fights do they plan to stage? If Canelo Alvarez leaves and the Spence versus Crawford rematch isn't happening, Gervonta, he's more or less in limbo right now. What else have they got?
It's not looking good.
Canelo Alvarez is only just one fight into what is supposed to be a 3-fight deal, and he's looking at a Golden Boy Promotions fighter. He's looking at one of Golden Boy's guys, Jaime Munguia, because that's the story. Per BoxingScene.com, Canelo Alvarez and Jaime Munguia have entered preliminary talks for a potential All-Mexico championship clash. BoxingScene.com has confirmed that the team for the unbeaten former junior middleweight champion has entered significant talks with Canelo Alvarez regarding a future All-Mexico showdown. The development, which was first reported by ESPN Knockout, emerged shortly after Munguia's one-sided 9th-round knockout of England's John Ryder in their January 27th super middleweight fight, after which he expressed his desire to face the division's undisputed king. I'm motivated for that fight next. It's going to be better than this one, and it's going to keep getting bigger. We want the best of the best at 168. We are going to be world champions.
Use your common sense. Canelo Alvarez signs a 3-fight deal with the PBC last year so that 2 fights into the deal, he could start looking at a Golden Boy Promotions fighter.
For that, you might as well have stayed with Eddie. For that, you may as well have stayed with Matchroom. If you were going to target a fighter who fights on the DAZN platform where you were fighting not but 2 fights ago, you may as well have stayed over there. If he isn't, it's likely because something went wrong. Something changed, and we all know what changed. When he entered into that deal, Showtime was still in the picture. This year, they're not.
The PBC's ability to pay him is guaranteed.
Perhaps the money to pay him was coming from Showtime. It would be a great fight amongst Mexicans, and if Canelo gives us the chance, it would be an honor to share the ring with him, said Munguia.
Not that long ago, Jaime Munguia was good enough for Jermall Charlo, their talks for what was supposed to be their fight that all fell apart, but he was good enough for Jermall Charlo. He was good enough for David Benavidez to pursue him. He was good enough for David.
That would have easily been the biggest fight of either of their careers, Jermall Charlo, David Benavidez. So don't poo-poo all over him now if Canelo's fighting him, if Canelo gets him in the ring. No, I don't think Jaime Munguia wins that fight. I think he loses. I think stylistically, Canelo has everything he needs to beat him, and beat him handily.
But you can't bellyache about Canelo fighting this guy when you would have been all right. You would have been okay with those guys fighting him.
What it is a fun fight, a fun stylistic matchup, and I take it for what it is. I don't want to overthink it. This is all intended to be entertainment, after all. But I think it speaks volumes about the PBC's current situation that after only 1 fight, just 2 fights, going on 2 fights, Canelo's eyeing an opponent that isn't a PBC fighter. Why would he be eyeing a non-PBC fighter when you're supposed to be providing him the opponents? That's why he jumped into bed with you guys, isn't it?
Why would he be looking at a fighter that isn't one of your fighters?
It's gotta be because they can't hold up their end of the bargain, i.e. they can't provide him his guarantee because they themselves don't have a financier. That's not the relationship they have with Amazon, and without that, you ain't got no deal.
So roll on Jaime Munguia.
I happen to come by an interesting set of comments from Timothy Bradley, who said, Munguia is everything Canelo Alvarez wishes he was with the fans. I myself don't necessarily agree with that, because if Munguia were more popular among the fans than Canelo, then it would be Munguia's name on the Forbes list. This is a numbers game after all.
Yeah.
But Timothy said, he is the epitome of Mexican-style boxing. This dude is never in a dull fight, always entertaining. I'll take some of yours, let me see if you can take some of mine. That is his mindset.
I don't agree with that. What I think it is that Jaime Munguia fits the mold for what some others may think of Mexican fighters and Mexican boxing, that he's that mid-range to inside pressure style fighter, that volume puncher, that aggressive guy, that he fits the mold perhaps for what some Americans may think of Mexican fighters.
But if you're talking to an American fight fan and what their idea of a Mexican fighter is, they would sooner think of a Jaime Munguia than a Canelo Alvarez, as Canelo is a lot more refined than a Jaime Munguia, whereas many Americans associate Mexican fighters with slugging and brawling and banging on the inside. So maybe to an American, it may seem that way, but the reality of it is, if Jaime were more popular amongst the fans, the Mexican ones, than Canelo Alvarez, then he would be the pay-per-view star. He would be the box office draw. He would be the one on the Forbes list, not Canelo. If he were more popular amongst the fans than Canelo. I mean, it's Canelo's fans that put him in the position that he's in. It's his fans that make that possible, and he has more of them than anyone else in the American market, as he still is the top earner in the sport. That doesn't happen by itself or by accident, and it's not something that you can manufacture. The reason Canelo Alvarez gets paid as much as he gets paid is because he's got more paying customers than anyone else.
So when Timothy Bradley says that Munguia is everything Canelo wishes he was with the fans, I can't agree with that because the numbers don't tell that story, and this is a numbers game.
You can manipulate the rank standings to manufacture a contender. You can go as far as moving heaven and earth to manufacture a champion, putting a title in a fighter's hands when he doesn't deserve one. You can do these things, but manufacturing a box office draw, that's a lot trickier. And as long as Canelo has been around, over 60 fights and consistently doing well at the box office, that's not really something you can manufacture, not for that duration of time. Canelo Alvarez consistently does robust numbers at the box office, at the gate, consistently.
He broke the indoor attendance record in America. He drew out that many fans. So when I say that Canelo is far more popular amongst the paying public than Jaime Munguia is, there's evidence to back that up.
And what these comments from Timothy really reflect to me are Americans' perception of some Mexican fighters, what they think of when they think of a Mexican fighter. They expect them all to be brawlers, how Jaime is a brawler, because for the most part, that's what he's been across 3 divisions, 3 weight classes, 154, 160, and 168. With Jaime, what you see is what you get, and that is the expectation a lot of Americans have when it comes to Mexican fighters, not realizing...
Not all Mexican fighters are brawlers. Not all Mexican fighters are pressure fighters.
Canelo can toggle from being a boxer puncher to being a pressure fighter, but he's not always a pressure fighter. Ray Vargas certainly isn't a pressure fighter. He's not a pressure style fighter, but he is Mexican.
In any event, Canelo Alvarez and Jaime Munguia may be fighting soon, and together they're sure to draw out a lot of fans. They're sure to draw out a large crowd, a large contingent of Mexican and Mexican-American fight fans who would like to see them fight.
And what that could herald is the end of Canelo Alvarez's time at the PBC, because why would he be looking at a Golden Boy Promotions fighter, a fighter who fights on the DAZN platform, if he jumped into bed with the PBC? The PBC were the ones that were supposed to be providing the opponents.
Not Golden Boy, not DAZN.
And I'm not complaining, I'm not going to overthink it. Boxer puncher versus pressure fighter makes for a fun stylistic matchup that fans can digest and enjoy.
So roll on Jaime Munguia in May.